that again because it worked well. So if you want to start, Grape Orange.
Sure. So we wanted to kind of go beyond the whole Dido ended up being kind of a passive, emotional female. Like, I think there's more to her than that. We were talking about how Dido, there was kind of a transfer of power when Aeneas came into Carthage. When he came in, she had all the power. She was the one that was, Aeneas had to get permission from her to come into the city. Excuse me, I'm sorry. And by the end of it, she's begging him to stay. She's in love with him. She's the weak one. And it's easy to say that based on current culture and how, the whole world has treated women throughout history, it's easy to say that is just because she's a weak woman, but we have to remember the curse that was put on her by Cupid.
Yeah, but because of the whole Cupid curse from Venus, it's not really fair to really bring that up as far as the traditional gender roles, because it was something that she really couldn't help. So we found the passage about, it was in the quiz, addressing the marriage and how she kind of had to consider, she kind of had to convince herself what she and Aeneas were doing was a marriage. As opposed to kind of just to justify it to herself, as opposed to just, having sexual intercourse with someone that you enjoy the company of. And if we're gonna delve into the whole gender role conversation, if you look at a lot of modern day society, it's really unfortunate, but a lot of the times, girls aren't as open about their sexuality, and it's the whole guys are more gross, and it's not how it should be, but a lot of the time guys are a lot more open about their sexuality. And if you look at TV shows, culture, there's also the whole slut shaming movement.
Yeah, it's the societal perception.
Yeah, and so if you just want to relate it back to that, there's that too.
Okay, so I'm gonna leap in here. Time out. So you've asserted that certain social conventions, okay? Can you support the idea that, no, I'm just not about in the text, but can you support, how would you go about supporting the notion that women are less expressive about sexuality than men are?
I think, do you have the exact quote when, so when they're in the cave.
No, it's not about the Aeneid.
Oh, okay.
It's about this assertion that Will has made that women in our society, he said, if I remember correctly, that women are less expressive about sexuality than men are.
Okay, so let's look at music. If we look at the popular culture of, hip hop. If we look at hip hop, which is a male-dominated genre for the most part, most lyrics are, very, very overtly sexual.
Okay, all right. So let's say that. So is hip hop, the fact that you have mainly male performers, is that indicative of women's hesitation to talk about sexuality, or are you using a social phenomenon, in support of an idea that the phenomenon does not support, actually? Okay.
So that's pretty convoluted, right?
No. Okay. So he said, no.
like-
This is a really interesting thing, and this gets to the heart of what we're talking about when we're discussing things. It is, can we support the assertions that we make? All right. And Will's made this assertion that women are less forthcoming or less expressive about sexuality than men are, and he's used as an example the hip hop world, right? Okay, the hip hop world is, would you say that in the hip hop world, there are equivalent opportunities for women to express ideas of any kind, let alone sexuality, in the hip hop world? In other words, is this a valid sampling of our society?
Okay.
Because it's not,
Can I give a
right?
sampling then?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
But here real quick. So I feel like what you're trying to say is that hip hop is a reflection of the social constructs that our society was about. And I think that's true. Hip hop is a reflection of societal values. It's an art form. and it's people speaking about what they feel it's a reflection of society. It's what people choose to listen to, and therefore it's an accurate representation of not necessarily like an innate, like a womanly need to like not express your sexuality. It's the innate, like the societal influence on women that keeps them from speaking.
Okay, all right. So Anna's saying something, and hang on, we'll get to everybody here. That hip hop is reflective of social norms in our society. Can you support that? Because you said, depending upon who's listening, well, who listens to it? Okay, are the people that listen to hip hop, are they reflective of society? They're certainly reflective of they represent one segment of society. But this is a really important concept, okay? When we think, for example, of the Chinese, for example, and what the Chinese think or do or something, okay? We're really talking at over 1 billion people that represent hundreds of ethnicities, okay? Or that Americans do something, or that Europeans do something. These are generalizations, okay? These are stereotypes that we have to confront, okay? We cannot accept those kinds of blanket statements. You can say, in a particular situation, X might, and if you can show it, that'd be good, but you can't claim that any social phenomena is representative of America, okay? All right, so Zaria had something to say.
Oh, I was just trying to clarify. You were talking about how hip hop is not a valid argument because it doesn't present an equal playing field. And they're more, it's a more male dominated spectrum. So women's voices are less likely to be heard in that situation anyway. So it's not a true.
Well, that's an empirical question. I mean, I think we would have to go and we'd have to say how many female hip hop performers are there compared to male performers, access to, distribution, avenues of distribution. I mean, it's an empirical question. I'm not asserting one way or another. It is an empirical question that we could explore. Okay, so Abby, really quick.
Oh, well, just one thing is, a different example would be through religion. A very great portion of America is religious. And in multiple religions that I can think of, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, the texts preach kind of a more conservative outlook, especially for women.
So, but your point with this whole come up with an example wasn't actually to support it. It's you're saying that generalizations just simply can't be supported.
That's right. You can't. I mean, in other words, I want you to be. This is all about critical thinking, right? It's all about critical thinking, and it's choosing to base your assumptions, your perspective on data, okay, on things that you can support, right? And what you can support, and I think that Abby raises a really interesting thing. You can say that the religious, of course, we haven't gotten to any of these texts yet, okay? So, but you could say the religious texts upon which certain religions, and you can pick one, are founded, have built into them a bias against women or a patriarchal viewpoint, or however you want to explain that. But we haven't even gotten there yet, okay? But what you could say, and this is germane to our argument, is what does the Aeneid say about women, okay? Because we can talk about that because you have been reading it. What does that say about women? And then you can do that. In other words, just to be aware of the fact that we need to hold ourselves and each other in this room anyway to a higher standard of argumentation. That we have to, and that's not to say that we can't express ideas, but we have to be very careful about how we express them so that we can back them up with data, or that we can answer questions that we can find ways, that there are ways of supporting that. Okay, 2 real quick questions, Isabel, and then Natalie.
Oh, am I allowed to talk on a topic that wasn't mine to
Sure.
Because I was gonna continue on the idea of sexism, I guess, in this book. And Virgil seems to be quite patronizing in regards to Ditto and her love, and the just like really referring to her as irrational as far as like contrasting her with Aeneas. Like he says at the beginning of book 4, he says.
Hang on just a second, Natalie, before you go on. Was this your comment was germane to our overall comment about supporting an assertion? Okay. All right, then we'll come back to it.
Yeah.
I was just going to say that I think what Will was talking about was a stereotype, which is a generalization, and that it doesn't necessarily have like factual data that can support it, but it's something that we experience every day,
Yes.
and that I think that it's important to talk about, because rather than just focusing on the Aeneid, I think we need to focus on the Aeneid and how it relates to us now, and that stereotypes relate to us now. And so I think that that's actually important to talk about, not just to talk specifically about the Aeneid and stuff that you can back up from the Aeneid, but to talk about stuff that maybe you can't back up necessarily with facts, but that we all experience.
Okay, this is very good. All right, so, and there's a different way of approaching it. You can say, I would assert that there is this stereotype in our society that women are less expressive in terms of sexuality. You can say that because that is a stereotype, okay? You can't say women are less expressive of sexuality in our society unless you can back that up. Do you see the difference between that? There's a difference, okay? I certainly agree that we need to be able to talk about stereotypes, absolutely, okay? But there's a difference between, there's a difference in asserting that women are less expressive. You can say, there is a stereotype, or I believe, or I sense that in society, women are less expressive of sexuality. You can say that. You can't say women are less expressive of their sexuality in society. That's making an assertion for which you need support. You can present your idea. You can talk about a stereotype as you've perceived it, but you can't make an assertion like that, okay? Unless you can back it up. Do you see the difference in that? Okay, that's a really important distinction. Are you with me? Do you see the difference there?
Yeah, I do. I
Yeah.
do see the difference
Okay.
there, but it's like stereotypes are there for a reason.
Well, of course they are.
I mean, they didn't just like conjure.
But you
out
can't
thin air.
take the important principle that comes out of this, is that you can't take a stereotype and claim that that is in fact what society thinks or believes or that sort of thing. In other words, you can't perpetuate the notion that a stereotype is actually reality.
So what is a stereotype then?
Well, a stereotype is, you can say, it's my observation, or I sense that our society has this stereotype, okay? You can't say, there's a difference between saying that, okay, and saying, in our society, women are less expressive of their sexuality.
So
I would
so
need
I
to
just
be able
need
to support
I need
that.
to acknowledge that it is a stereotype instead.
Yes. Okay,
Sure.
very good, excellent. Thank you. Well done. All right, sorry to intrude that, but this is this is a huge thing because people make these kinds of claims all the time, okay? And they are almost always unsupported. But they become entrenched in our society, okay, as accepted reality. And this is where we need to hold ourselves to a higher level, a higher standard of observation and assertion. That we can't make these things unless we can support them. Okay? And sometimes there are empirical questions. Sometimes they are questions that we can, in fact, support if we wanted to devote our lifetime to collecting and analyzing the data. But that's very hard. Okay? And you've heard these expressions, people, human beings fear death. Okay. You can say, I fear death. Gilgamesh fears death, but you can't say human beings fear death unless you want to go through the impossible task of polling human beings and determining whether that is in fact real or not. Okay, are you with me?
So,
Yeah.
in light of the caucus tonight,
Mhm.
what do you think about a state being Republican?
Well, that's an empirical question. Okay, you can say a state. I mean, you could possibly base. You could say how many registered voters are there, and what is their political affiliation. And you can say according to the political affiliation of registered voters in X geographic area, that area has more Republicans or Democrats than the other. You can say that, but that's based on empirical evidence.
That's a representation. Crazy.
But that's only answered the question about the question is, and this is where the things that we're talking about, the questions, the more specific they are, the more likely we can actually answer them. It doesn't say, I mean, it doesn't, is Iowa Republican or Democrat? You can say, well, again, based on registered voters and their political affiliation, expressed a political affiliation, that Iowa has more Republican registered voters than Democrats. You can say that. Does that mean that they embrace the perspectives or the values of the Republican Party? No. You can only say that according to the registers only according to the number of registered voters, they are X or Y. That's an empirical question.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I looked up the definition of stereotype, and it is a widely held beliefs and oversimplified image or idea of a particular type of person. I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
But I think what Will is saying is that this stereotype exists. People all acknowledge that. Like, that is what he was saying. This is the stereotype. And he's not making generalizations. It's supporting the stereotype. He's saying that this is the stereotype, and that Dido's story is one of the stories that kind of plays into the stereotype.
Yes. Okay. So no, I agree. Don't get me wrong. I'm saying, but there's a difference between saying there is a stereotype of X and X.
Yeah.
And Will started his statement by saying X.
I thought the stereotype was
Yes.
implied. I mean,
Yes.
I
Yeah,
wasn't-
but that we can't accept that. We can't accept
I
implied.
will make a note of it.
Okay. No, we all have to make a note of it. Okay. All right. I'm sorry, Isabel. I hijacked the whole thing.
Yeah.
Natalie was going. Okay, there you go.
That's fine. At the beginning of book 4, Virgil is basically portraying Dido as like very irrational. Like it's really contrast with his portrayal of Aeneas and his love. Because he refers to Dido like her love. He says, hour by hour nursing the wound with her lifeblood, consumed by the fire buried in her heart. Like it seems really like to consume the entirety of her. Whereas with Aeneas, it's much more of like for him it's a distraction from his duty, but for her it's what consumes her and what becomes her duty is her love to him. And like it continues all the way to when she dies at the beginning of, well, I guess she dies at the end of book 4, but at the beginning of book 5 it says, what could light such a conflagration, the lengths a woman driven mad can go. And so like it's basically saying that like her love has driven her insane, and like portraying her as a very irrational human being who would forego all of these things and all of her responsibilities, leaving her city without a leader because of love. Whereas Aeneas basically like is slightly deterred from his duty for a period of time because of his love, but then eventually returns to it as being portrayed as like a rational thinker. So I just thought that was interesting.
Well, I was just gonna say, relating to that, it seems like what?
I'm in charge and I was raising my hand. Sorry. You go.
It seems like Virgil created Dido with the intention of emphasizing the gender roles, like to show what will happen if a woman tries to overstep her boundaries, because Virgil did create the Aeneid to like demonstrate the ideal Roman society. So that's kind of what they think women should do.
If I could just put a little bit, I certainly agree. There are certain gender roles in this, but you also have to look at the cultures that you're dealing with. I mean, Queen Dido is the precursor to the Carthaginians, who the Romans hated. And this is basically a propaganda piece. I mean, we see everything about Augustus and everything else. So, of course, they're going to portray most Carthaginian characters as being somehow impotent or inferior to the Romans. That's just...
I guess for me, at least, it's really hard to see Dido as like weak and like, because I think she's a very strong and very competent woman, and like the reason she is like so caught up in her love and just unable to let it go is because she is cursed by Cupid, and it said the word like poison in there. So like for me, it's like it's not. I didn't, at least when I read her, I read it as like very tragic because she literally can't help it. I never really read her as weak because it's not one of her character traits. Something it's like an external force that it's something that the gods did after all. So I just want to say that.
We were also talking about their fates and how you would think that going into this like love affair that Cupid had effects on, that they would both, you know, it would still be their fated paths. And it even says that at the very end of book 4, on whatever page it's on, the end of book 4, line 870 something, it says, Dido was dying a death not fated nor deserved. And so I started thinking about what you were saying about how it's not really her that is obsessed with him. It's the curse that's on her. And I thought maybe that curse is like a metaphor for how a woman falls in love as opposed to supposedly how this warrior falls in love. You know, she says, you know, they had sex and then she was like, I think we're married now. And then when he's leaving, he said on line 423, he was like, nor did I once extend a bridegroom's torch or enter into a marriage pact with you. He was like, we didn't actually do that and I'm leaving. And I'm thinking maybe that Virgil, that Cupid's curse was, this is how a woman falls in love and this is how a man leaves her.
I find it difficult to relate it back to other works, simply like with the time given and the lack of time for like huge research into like the Iliad and other works such as that. But something that comes to mind for me as a comparison is Aeneas' wife who died at Troy. What was her name again? Creusa. I'll try to find what it was, but I know it's in, I believe, book 2 in the final hours of Troy. And it's talking about how he's running out and then he loses his wife, and then he encounters her ghost, and it says, and the ghost is telling him how page 100.
Book and number, line number.
Book 2, page 100, and
it's like 960 to the end.
I was trying to find what she was saying.
Dear husband.
Oh, here it is. Line 962, page 101, book 2. So, my dear husband, why so you to give yourself to such mad flights of grief? It's not without the will of God, these things have to come to pass. The king of lofty Olympus won't allow it, along exiles your fate. Hold dear the sum we share, we love together. And she's like encouraging him to keep going out and like find a different wife and follow the will of the gods. And I think that more so plays into the role of the women, like the women role as more so than Dido, because I think Dido is more subject to their impression of Carthage, because like they destroyed Carthage like twice and they're huge enemies in the past. And this one I think is a more accurate depiction of that, and how they're like a support basis for their husband. I guess you could draw just from specifically this example. And I would try and drag more examples out, but like I said, due limitations, I can only rely on this one so far, and I think that's a better accurate depiction.
So I just have a general question about fate. I was going to ask if fate is something that merely exists and the gods can choose to tamper with or abide by, or do the gods get to select the fates for each individual person? And if it's the latter, how do they choose who has a gruesome fate such as Dido or a glorious one such as Aeneas?
Well, actually, online, like Amy term, like it's 65. It says since he was dying, it what? Wait, oh, he doesn't like us to say the page. Book 4.
Oh, sorry.
Line 865.
You can say pages.
Okay,
too,
well,
but
sorry.
you just make
page,
sure that
page 152.
Make sure that you do the line, book, and numbers, because some people might not be. I mean, I hope that you're all using the same edition, but maybe not.
It says since she was dying a death not fated or deserved. So I guess she didn't really. Her death wasn't really fated. So I don't really know how that works.
So if gods are there merely, so you're saying it's the latter one, like fate is already decided and they get to either tamper with it or just kind of let it play out. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying I don't know.
Yeah, well,
but the only example that we really have of something going against fate is Dido so far. So.
Anna.
Okay, so I'm just gonna Google this as well. From my knowledge of Roman mythology, years of life, what I've learned is that fate is like predetermined, and gods and mortals have to follow it. Like it's not something that you can change. It's like a separate thing. It's not a god. It's not. I mean, to get used to like. The thing is, the gods tamper with people's lives, but that's not fate. That's gods tampering with lives. Fate happens.
Well, if the mortals have like certain set fates, and the gods don't have necessarily control over their fates, then do the gods have free will?
Do the gods what?
Have free will.
Free will.
Yeah, but the gods are much more human characters in this whole world. Yeah, I mean, they're
It's
not,
just interesting
they're
to
not omnipotent enough.
kind of think about it. Some unknown force or fates are just fates. Then who really has control of anything?
See, fate is like not subjective. It's just like so really. It's not. Nobody has control, but at the same time, like people can operate within this like framework of fate and make decisions. So they do have will.
Yeah,
It's
I
just
don't
there's only so
remember.
much you can do.
I don't remember who said this last time, but someone said that like fate is the end, and then like free will happens in between.
Yeah.
And so that probably happens with gods too. Like there, Aeneas is fated to found Rome or go to Rome, and Juno knows this, but she's still going to tamper and use her free will in the middle to make it as hard for him as possible. So I think that like fate's going to happen, but that doesn't mean free will doesn't exist.
Yeah,
How you get
I
free
know
will.
They're not mutually exclusive, I guess.
Yeah.
I was just asking that question to kind of just like figure out, I guess, certain gods' reasonings for doing what they do, if that makes sense.
They're petty.
Other thinking-
It's irrelevant
Yeah, it's
to this, at least.
If I may, we've got just a few minutes left. This question of fate and free will. This is a very difficult one, right? How many of you feel like you have free will? How many of you feel as though there are certain forces at work in your life that are channeling you in one direction or another?
Does
You can't
yourself-
have both.
What?
I would argue that.
I was going to ask if yourself counted.
You can't have both.
Who says?
I never said you.
Says you?
That's
Says
a question that
logically.
you have
Yeah.
to back up.
Says logically.
Yeah, that's a generalization
Yeah.
assertion.
It's not.
No, this is logic. You can't say there are forces at work in my life that are directing what I have or what happens
Okay,
to
I
me,
see,
that
I
have
see.
free will.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You gotta pick one of the other.
I have a question. Does yourself count as a force that acts in your life? Like,
Not an outside force.
like, are you saying like external force, or are you saying?
Whatever
I
force,
think
whether you
we-
see that as external or not, you've got to decide. I mean, logically, you've got to decide whether there are, what I think we see here is that we, at least in this group, are perfectly happy with the notion that we have free will, we can make our own decisions, and that there are forces working on it to shaping our lives. We're perfectly happy with that idea. I'm just saying that logically, there's a huge problem there.
And that invalidates
Agree.
all of Christianity.
Correct.
Oh, well, now that's, I
Correct.
think that's a little bit of I think that is a blanket assertion that you can't support.
I think I can.
Well, all right.
Not in 1 minute.
All of Christianity- all of
Theologians.
Christianity is a big sample.
You
This is
invalidate
fun.
a lot of
This
Christianity.
is what I like.
Kind of invalidate.
Well, we'll see.
I would
We're
agree.
not-
I would
we're not-
agree that you can't have
we're not
both, but I
Christian.